right, so simple white bread. What you're gonna need: bread flour, yeast, salt, some sugar, and oil, which I forgot to grab actually. Any oil. Vegetable oil works best because it's non-flavored. It doesn't really have a flavor to it, whereas olive oil will work too, but it will give that flavor to it. So this recipe, it's not cups, it's not tablespoons, it's all measurements. So you're going to need a scale to do this. So the first thing we're going to do is get our yeast activated. Let me just pull up my recipe here. So yeah, we're going to do our yeast first. So we're going to start with 700 grams of room temperature water. So I'm just going to put that on the scale and zero it out. So room temperature water, the best way to describe it without using a thermostat or a temperature gauge or whatever is when you run your fingers under the water, you shouldn't really feel a temperature difference at all from your skin to the water pressure. If it's slightly warmer, that's fine. It'll just make the yeast activate faster. Yeah, that's good. So I need 700 grams. So I'm on grams. So that's 366 anymore. I went over. Trying to get as accurate as possible. Because this is a wet dough, so if you make this at home, don't be surprised. Like if you find it a little sticky when you make this dough, it's going to be wet to begin with. Okay, there's 700. To that, we're going to add yeast and sugar. The sugar is going to help activate the yeast, of course. So we're going to need, depending on what you're using, if you're using instant yeast, you're going to need about 4 grams. A little bit more is okay. Again, active dry yeast, 5 grams. Again, a little bit more is okay. And then there's fresh yeast, which you're going to use about 10 grams for that. But we're using active dry yeast. So we're going to use about 5 grams. There's 5. I'm going to do 6 because I like mine a little airy inside. And this will kind of help it too. So we're going to set that aside. We're going to get sugar. And sugar isn't that much either. It's, where is it? Does it even call for sugar? I can't remember. Oh no, I just add the sugar to the water because I want to activate it. This actually doesn't call for sugar, this recipe. Yeah, no, it doesn't call for sugar. I just put it in there because I like to activate the yeast before I put it into the mixture, just so I know that's gonna give me what I want. So, tablespoon and a half maybe. Just gonna put that in the water. And then to that, pull it back so you can see what I'm doing. Where's the best angle there? So there's water with sugar in it. And I'm just gonna add the yeast. And give it a quick stir. And that's going to sit now for about 5 or 7 minutes. You should start to see like a foam start to create. That lets you know that your yeast is activated. So we're just going to set that to the side. Now we're going to measure out our flour and our water, or our flour and our salt, sorry. If you're doing this in a mixer, it calls for you to separate, like mix a little bit at a time. I'm doing this by hand, and every time I've done it, I just go for it, put everything in the bowl, and just go for it. So that's what I'm going to do today. So we're going to start off with 1,000 grams. Now this recipe calls all-purpose flour. I use bread flour. It's just a little bit easier to get the gluten formation that you want than all-purpose. If you're using all-purpose, you're probably going to have to knead a little bit longer than you would for bread flour. So we need 1,000 grams of flour. So I'm going to clean up this water that I spilled. Wrapped up my second bag. It's a good thing I went shopping the other day. Okay, just a little bit over, so I gotta take some out. Perfect. All right, and the next thing we're gonna weigh out is our salt. There's quite a bit of salt in this recipe. It's 22 grams of salt, but that's gonna give you your flavor that you want. There you go, 22 right on. And we're just going to add that to the flour. And at this point, I like to take a whisk. If you had a sifter, you could sift in the salt and the flour together. I just sifted it, mix it around this way just to get it incorporated. And I'm going to make a little divot where I'm going to start to pour my liquids. And I'm just going to put that aside. So another thing you're going to need for this recipe is a Dutch oven. If you don't have a Dutch oven, you can use Pyrex dishes that are somewhat shaped like this with a lid. Because for the first like 15 minutes of the cooking process, it's going to be inside this, because this is going to trap all the steam and help the bread rise more before it starts to form a crust. Okay. So I just use this dish right here. It's pretty simple. You throw this in the oven as it's heating up, and then you pull it out and you carefully dump the bread in. So I'll show you that later when we get to that point. You're also going to need a sharp knife or an X-Acto blade. I just got to the dollar store and I got this X-Acto blade. It's the only time I use this like for the bread, so I know it's clean. Because you're going to use this to score your bread right before you put it in the oven as well. From this recipe, you should get 2 medium-sized loaves of bread. All right, so take a look at our yeast. I don't know if you can see that very well. Not really, it's kind of blown out from the light. But it's really foamy. So we're gonna put that in now. Along with, I think it's 2 tablespoons of oil. Or do we put oil in? Oh, no, I'm thinking of the buns I made the other day. Yeah. No, we're just using oil for the coating of the thing. The bowl or whatever, so it doesn't stick while it rises. Okay, so we're just gonna add this to our flour salt. And we're gonna give a stir and just incorporate it. Now, because this is a wet dough, don't add flour. Just leave it as is. This should be exactly the amount of flour you need, is 1,000 grams. And as you stir, it's going to get shaggy and shaggier. It's going to stick if you put it on the counter. That's the thing. So you can't knead this on the counter if you're doing this by hand. This is why it's easier to do in a mixer, because the mixer is doing all the mixing for you. But I do all the kneading inside the bowl. And then I'm going to transfer it to a cleaner bowl, or actually I've got this container I got at the dollar store that I use, because it saves just on plastic wrap. And when you're making big batches too, it's nice to have something that, you know, it's not going to, the dough's not going to overflow in, right? So I've got a pretty shaggy dough right now. Okay, I'm just going to keep mixing, try to get as much as the flour incorporated first before you get your hands in there. Oh, and I just broke my spoon. Guess we're going in by hand now. Now, one trick to help with sticking is wetting your hands. Okay, and I'm just going to start kneading this in here. You're just going to get to the point where all the flour is incorporated. You just want all the flour wet. So I'm just folding it over itself, trying to pick up the dough at the bottom, scraping the sides of the shaggy bits that are sticking to the sides of the bowl. Let me see. Okay, it's sticking a little bit to my hand, so I'm going to wet them again a bit. I'll get this off first. That's better. So yeah, you're just going to need this for a bit. Just make sure you get all bits of the flour incorporated. That looks good. So we got, again, it's pretty blown out from the light, but we got all the flour incorporated in the dough for now. It's pretty wet and sticky. Okay. So now we're going to take our proofing dish. This is my proofing container. And we're just going to pour a little oil in, just to coat it. That should be enough. This dough won't go too big. I just use it just for the convenience. You don't really need a, like if I were to keep it in this bowl right here, it'd probably be forming a dome by the 2-hour mark. So that's why I like to put it in this container, just because I know I've got the extra room. Okay, that should be good. So now we're going to try and transfer this all in one piece. Just in the center. That's it. So now we're going to have to let this sit for half an hour. And during that half-hour period, all the flour that's in the mixture that you can't see, that's not totally wet, will be wetted by the water in the dough. So I'm just going to cover this up. So that's the first part. So in half an hour, we're going to open this up and we're going to fold it in on itself. This is the first knead that we're going to, this is like a knead. It's not going to be too extensive. You can do multiples of that step. Like you can do it every 30 minutes if you want. Otherwise, you just do it the first 30 minutes and then you let it sit for an hour and a half. And then after that period, then that's when you cut and shape the dough. So I'm just going to leave this sitting here for half an hour. this is going to be the kneading process. Well, the first fold over that you could do if you want. It's the mandatory one. You have to do this one first. You don't have to do it again after this time. I'm just going to let this sit for an hour and a half. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wet my hands a bit, just so the dough doesn't stick. And I'm going to pick it up and just fold it over. Opposite side, pick it up, fold it over, flip it, and pull the sides up now. And the other side. And then I like to give it a little flip over, just so those seams are underneath. And then you got your dough for the second part. Now it's going to sit here in this container for an hour and a half. So I'll see you guys, whoever wants to watch this, back in an hour and a half, where I will be cutting the dough in half and shaping it into 2 loaves. Looks like now. So it's been fermenting or proofing in here for, let me turn this light off, for an hour and a half. So it's pretty much doubled in size. Smells pretty good. But you can see the dough is pretty much doubled in size, spread out basically on the bottom of the dish here. But you're gonna need flour, a knife to cut, and then 2 medium bowls, and then tea towels that are smooth cloth, not a fuzzy cloth or a textured cloth, more like linen almost. Let me grab my knife. So we're just going to flour our work surface. Flour our hands. Nope, someone sent me a message. It can wait. All right, and then the goal of this right now is to get this out of here without tearing it. You want to try and avoid tearing the dough. So I'm going to try and do this really slow. There we go. Oh, it tore a little there, but okay. All right. Now we're going to roughly shape these or cut this in half. Just going to throw some flour on there. My blade too, just in case. So I'm going to say about there. We got 2 halves. I don't know how blown out this is going to be, but let me get this a little more like that. There you go. And we're going to start shaping them. Oh. Flour. So to shape the dough, just start pulling in the sides into the center. You do this once. Sometimes you have to give it a little pinch at the top too, like a little twist, just so it holds. Flip that over and let that sit for a second. And we're gonna do the same to our other one. Just folding the sides into the middle. We'll get air bubbles on the outside. That's fine right now. Like, I want an airy dough, so I'm trying to keep as much air in the dough as I want, or as I can. Okay, I'm just gonna give that a flip. I'll just pop the bubble. Okay, so we're just gonna let those sit for a couple of minutes. From the little stretching that we did, we just want the gluten to relax just a little bit. So we're gonna give that like 10 minutes just to sit. And then we're gonna basically do the same thing again, where we're gonna fold the sides in on itself again, and because we're gonna try and create a tight dome ball shape when we flip it over again. It's just simple white bread, simple crusty white bread. It's the same one I posted a picture of a while ago. And it's the same recipe, just when I made the sunflower bread, I just add sunflower seeds to it instead. And that just made it the sunflower bread. So let's just, I can tell right away that one of my cutting job was a little off. One's a little bit bigger than the other, but that's fine. All right, so I'm just gonna tip this over again, and I'm gonna fold in again on itself, trying to create a tight bubble or a tight top. You want like a dome. And as you're pulling it in, you'll be breaking air bubbles that were created in the dough by fermenting it. So now I just give it a little pinch so the dough sticks together. You give it a toss. And I like to just to pop any bubbles that may be at the very bottom. I'm pushing it and pinching it in on as I turn it. All right. So that one's done. It's just going to sit there for a second. I'm going to do the same thing to this one. Pull it in on itself. Give it a pinch to try and seal the seams a little bit. All right, so those are shaped. So the next thing you're gonna do is you're gonna take your tea towels, take some flour, and generously cover your tea towels. I like to rub it in and smooth it out too. Just make sure I get it in between, like into the cloth itself, really. All right. Then you're gonna take one of your bowls. And you're just gonna line the bowl with the cloth. All right. Then we're gonna take one of our loaves, flip it upside down so seam sides up, and just place it in the bottom of the bowl like that. I'm gonna cover it up. I'm gonna set it aside. And same thing again. Just gonna generously flour our tea towel. And again, make sure it's a smooth tea towel, not a fluffy tea towel or one with a textured design or something like that, because that's going to imprint into your dough as it proofs for the second time here. All right. Take our bowl and we'll just put it in again. Again, flip it over, seam side up. Because you want, as it expands, it's going to almost shape around the sides of the bowl. So you want the smooth side to be the one that's being pressed out to keep its shape a little bit. So I'm going to fold this over. Gotta get this excess flour off here. And these are going to go in the fridge now to proof for a second time for an hour. I'm going to do 450 degrees, and I'm going to put the Dutch oven in, and it's going to sit and warm up with the oven as well, and it's going to just be really hot when I take it out to put the dough in. So that's what you prep while it's in the in the fridge, half hour before you're about to bake. Turn the oven on 450 and put the Dutch oven inside to warm up with the oven and get hot. So for temperature, I set it at 450. The recipe I'm loosely following states that you should put it at 500, and then you're going to lower the temperature down to 450 at some point. I'm just going to do 450 because I know last time I did in my oven at 500, like following their specific steps, it ended up burning the bottom of the bread. So I've got the oven preheating. It's been preheating for about half hour now at 45. The Dutch oven's in there warming up with it. Sorry, the temperature's 450. It's been in there warming up. So I'm gonna take it out soon and start with the first loaf soon. Just gonna wait for a little bit more. Now with the recipe as well that I'm following, it's got different cook times than I do too. It's just that I noticed the first time I did it, the times were maybe a little bit too long, and maybe that's why I burnt the bottom as well. So this time I'm gonna follow the same time periods I used the last time I made it, when I made the sunflower bread, because it turned out pretty perfect. So for this next step, you're gonna need a sharp blade, either sharp like a paring knife. Oh, I got an alarm going on. Or I use an X-Acto knife. And it's brand new. It's only been used for bread, so. But you're gonna use this to score your bread. The next thing is either a spray bottle, or I just use the pastry brush or basting brush, what do you want to call it? And because you're gonna wet the top of the bread, just to add some more water in there to create some more steam for it to expand while it's in the oven. All right, so I'm gonna grab the Dutch oven out of the oven. So this has been heating up in the oven. Let's move this over here. So we're going to take the loaf, and you're going to try and get as center as possible into the bottom of the pan. And it should just fall out because we got this heavily floured. Right, let's try. Do it without burning myself. So it's in. I'm going to take this, just dust some of this flour off the top first before I wet it a little bit, because I don't want to paste on top. The excess off there. So I'm just going to, I should get through here. So I'm going to wet the brush. And I'm just going to get a little bit of water on the top there just for some added steam. It's a lot easier if you have a spray bottle because you can just go and spray the top, right? All right. So now we're going to take the razor and we're going to score. I'm just going to do 2 lines parallel to each other, one on either side of the loaf. Yeah. Try and show this to you what it looks like. Be careful because this Dutch oven's really hot right now. It's pretty blown out, but there's 2 slits on the top there. So I'm gonna get the lid. We're gonna put it in the oven. I'm gonna start 25 minutes. Take the lid off and I'm gonna check it. If it's looking pretty full, then I'm gonna take the lid off and I'm gonna bake it for probably 10 minutes, just to brown the outside. With the cutting, it helps because it tells the bread where to split already. Otherwise, it may split down the side, or crack all over the place. It just helps the bread expand and have somewhere to it has somewhere the steam to go to be released is through the cuts that you made. So those will open up rather than having a solid piece of bread that may split at the side and then open up a big bubble or something on the edge. So that's going to be in there for 25 minutes. Okay, I'm going to check on how it's doing. Yeah, that's raised all the way up. So I'm going to take the lid off. I'm going to put it in there for another 20 minutes. Gonna check it out probably 15 minutes just to see how dark it is on the outside. Because right now it's a light pale brown. It hasn't really browned up. It's browned where it's touched the top of the lid. That's the only part where it's brown. So at this point, I can smell it out of the oven. So I'm gonna take it out and give it a test. Move that over here. Yeah, we'll tip this down because you can see it's pretty brown. So I'm just gonna test. Can you hear that? It sounds hollow. It's done. That's it. So there you go. Sorry, there's fucking light. There it is. It's the first loaf. If you can listen carefully, I'll try to be quiet. You can actually hear the crust cracking. So I just put the Dutch oven back in because I want it to warm. The lid's been cold now because it's been sitting out, so I want it to warm back up. So I'm going to leave that in for a bit just so it gets warm. But so you can see the little divot there at the top. That's from the lid. Yeah, you probably don't hear it, but it's crackling right now. That means the skin's cracking. That's a good sign. And you can see where I slit it. So now the hard part is watching it just sit there and not cutting into it. So I'm going to grab that other dough, actually. We're just going to wait for that Dutch oven to heat up again. too. And I've had 3 beers. I need some bread. Look at that. Oh, nice and airy. It's very light. Still warm enough to melt the butter. Oh. So soft. Excuse me as I enjoy this. Oh yeah, this one's done. Here, I'll show you. Testing it. You flip it out. Careful, it's Dutch ovens are really hot. And I don't know if you can hear, but it sounds hollow inside. That tells you it's done. We're just gonna flip it onto a tray. And that's it. Here's our second loaf. Again, with the little indentation from our lid, but still, it's bread. Again, you can see where I slit it down the sides. When you slit your bread, you can split it any way you want, really. You can do across, like do a square. That's cool. Down the middle, fine. You just want somewhere that some of the steam's gonna expand and like escape through the bread and not like create a tear somewhere else, right? So there you guys go.